Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second episode of the dreaded Haggard podcast. Today, I am joined by the legendary lore master of Sotek. We're going to be talking a little bit about Warhammer fantasy literature, Warhammer fantasy battles. What is the proper nomenclature for that, anyways?
I just say Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah,
because that kind of
it's easier.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you should be able to just call it Warhammer because it is the oldest, but most people think you're saying 40K.
Fair play, man. Well, we're going to be talking about books. This is a question I get a lot, and I would imagine you probably answered this on like every one of your streams, right? It's probably a pretty common question.
A significant amount of them, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question is, if you're getting into Warhammer fantasy lore, you want to like learn about the characters. Maybe you started playing Total War Warhammer. You had never known anything about Warhammer fantasy before. What books should you pick up if you really want to take that deep dive or just kind of a scratch that topical itch? And we have the expert of experts here. We have the lore master of Sotek, and I think without further ado, man, let's get into the first book or the first series or the first omnibus, as it's titled on the Games Workshop website. What would you recommend as the first dive into Warhammer fantasy battles?
So the first series that I recommend to anybody who doesn't know anything, like you have no idea what Warhammer Fantasy is, other than maybe you've played Total War. Like you barely know who anybody is. You don't know what the hell's going on. Then the best place to start is Gotrek and Felix. It is the beginner's guide to Warhammer, while also being like an insanely fun, entertaining experience.
Yeah, it really is, man. I think I came to you. This must have been like almost like a year and a half, 2 years ago, like asking that same question. And you referred me to the Gotrek and Felix omnibus, and it's great, man, because it's kind of like episodic in the sense that like old school Star Trek is, where like each episode's a little bit different. Granted, there is one big cohesive story, but it feels like every kind of book or every segment you're getting something unique, and you also get those perspectives into like I remember in the first couple books you're dealing with orcs and goblins, and then there's like chaos sorcerers, and there's just a little bit of everything right away. But yeah, was this how you actually started your Warhammer Fantasy? Like what? I mean, obviously you've been at it forever. What did you start with? Was it Gotrek and Felix or?
When it comes to Black Library books, yeah, I started like novel series with Gotrek and Felix. I mean, I was like a lot of people where I started with the army books, which of course have a lot of lore in them, but you can't buy those anymore. They're like collector's items now.
Yeah.
But and they're excellent, but they're also hyper focused on like a specific faction. Gotrek and Felix, the thing that made it really nice is that the first omnibus is really special compared to the others, because the first book. So an omnibus, for anyone that's unaware, is when you take usually 3 books in a series and you put them all together in one book, and that's an omnibus. So it's multiple books put together. But for Gotrek and Felix, it has a pretty interesting story, because the first omnibus, the first book, which is called Troll Slayer, is not a normal story. It's a collection of stories. It's almost more like an anthology. Yeah. Because originally Gotrek and Felix was a White Dwarf magazine article kind of thing. So like you would go pick up your White Dwarf once a month at your local Games Workshop, and there would be a Gotrek and Felix short story in it.
So it was like an excerpt kind of. It was just episodic and kind of like it wasn't like a big. Yeah. Okay. Understood. I didn't know that.
And that's why there wasn't really like a story. It was more like just a collection of fighting different monsters of the week. Yeah. With a little bit of cohesive information. But then you get to the second book, Skaven Slayer, and that's when there's actually like a narrative for the rest of the series. Yeah. Because it started getting enough interest that William King was given the permission to actually like write legit books.
Yeah.
And that's where we started seeing all that stuff go down.
And that's a good point too, because a lot of people might pick up the first omnibus and like read the first portion of the story, which you articulated as kind of kind of not as much of a cohesive book. It's more like a bunch of short stories kind of tacked together. But for anyone reading it, you said that in the second of the omnibus, the second book is when it becomes like a cohesive main kind of traditional novel structure.
Once you hit Skaven Slayer, you start getting into events that are like significant and will be important for the rest of time. Yeah. Like there are some important moments in Troll Slayer, which is the first book in its collection of stories, like the way Gotrek loses his eye is in that story.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I think a lot of people will be very surprised how he lost it.
I know. I was for sure. Like, I don't want to spoil it. And also, guys, we're not going to like be trying not to spoil. I mean, you can look at the cover of the book here on the screen and you'll see he's wearing an eye patch. So the fact that he's lost an eye is it's kind of out there, but we'll do our best not to spoil anything. But yeah, it was definitely caught me off guard when it happened.
But
like,
the first omnibus is a delight. I mean, I like the way it's shaped, because the first book, because it doesn't have like a super hardcore story at first, and it's just rapid fire, it just introduces you to concepts. Like it introduces you to beastmen, and then it introduces you to greenskins, and it introduces you to chaos warriors, and like it gives you a little bit of info on them. And then when you hit the second book, it's nothing but Skaven for an entire novel. And then you get to the third book, which is just a roller coaster ride. Yeah. I don't want to spoil anything about the third book. It's called Demon Slayer.
Dude.
But it is
that one's so good.
Ride.
It's so good, man. Yeah, I remember just getting so hyped during those books. And I just, like, I want to just talk to you about it. Maybe we'll have that for like another episode with like a spoiler warning. But man, like, yeah.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. But yeah, I don't want to... For anyone that just wants to walk in blind and just... And I will say, these books they weren't intended to be like super highbrow, which some Warhammer books are.
They're easy reads.
These ones are more like your Saturday morning cartoon, but they're meant for young adults. So there's, pretty crazy violence and death and love and a bunch of just it's a good time. Like you just grab a beer or whatever, pop down in a chair, and it's like watching a movie. It's like a Marvel movie. Like it's just a good time.
Yeah, the series is so good, and like obviously one of the main villains throughout all of the Gotrek and Felix books, Thankful, is an amazing character. So like, yeah, you get a perspective on the Empire through Felix. Gotrek gives you a pretty interesting insight into Dwarven culture, and then obviously you're dealing with Thankful, who does have his own perspective in these novels, and he's great. He's so good.
That's probably the biggest. I will say that's the biggest reason I recommend this series is that most of the story is almost always from Felix's perspective. Yeah. Usually they'll give you like villain perspectives just so you can get to know the villain. So like when Thankful appears, you get a lot from his view. And then Thankful literally became like one of the most beloved characters of Warhammer Fantasy, so he just kind of keeps coming back. But the thing about Felix is that he is designed to be he's kind of a reader insert character. Yeah. Like he's just like you. He's literally just a guy. He doesn't have any powers. He doesn't have any unique abilities. He's like scared shitless 99% of the time. He's just trying to stay alive. But he gives you an understanding of the universe from a human perspective, which I think can really help people appreciate things like Beastmen, Greenskins, Warriors of Chaos. Like, if you read something like 40K, it can be hard to appreciate how dangerous the universe is if you're reading from a Space Marine perspective, because we're not Space Marines. We would be Imperial Guard. Yeah.
If even.
Gotrek and Felix, you would like... For most people, you would be Felix. He has a little bit of combat training, but there's nothing particularly special about him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's an awesome character to follow because he helps give you an understanding of just how scary a lot of these creatures that in Total War Warhammer are like trash tier mobs.
Yeah, we like laugh at them.
But from Felix's perspective, they're terrifying. At least in the obviously he gets stronger throughout the series, but especially in the first 3 books. Felix has a very healthy fear of a lot of things that you might not think are scary, but when you see them from his perspective, you'd probably go, I don't want to be anywhere near that.
Oh, man. Especially the Beastmen, dude. They always have freaked me out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, when you first meet Felix, he's like he obviously comes from like a wealthy kind of noble family. He has like you said, maybe like a little bit of duelist training just from being part of the nobility, and like really he was like a university student, wasn't he? Like when he met Gotrek.
Yeah, he was trying to be
a college kid, man.
Yeah, he was like a poet, or he was trying to be like a stage writer. Like he wanted to write like operas or plays. Yeah. And he was very theatrical, which got him in trouble when he met Gotrek on a drunken bender, which you'll learn about when you
you learn right away. It happens very quickly, and their relationship is so interesting because their cultures are so just like so different. But it's really cool to see the evolution of Felix, and that's like one of my big problems with a lot of 40K literature that's from the perspective of Space Marines and these characters who are like seemingly, then they shall know no fear. Yes, we are infallible soldiers of the 41st millennia. Obviously it's not all like that, but Felix is like, for the first couple books, they're encountering some gnarly shit. And, he's like, usually kind of, he'll fight, but he's like a little bit hiding behind Gotrek. But it's cool to see his evolution to become like, he's like, okay, I've almost died before. I know what to expect here. I've learned to conquer my fears. It's a really cool progression for his character. And how many books in total are there for Gotrek and Felix?
For
Before I forget,
for the main series,
Mhm.
if you want to read through if you want to read through where there is like a cohesive storyline,
yeah.
I believe there's about 15 books.
Oh shit, that's deep.
But if you want to like know about everything, then there's way more. There's a lot of like anthologies and short stories and audio dramas you can pick up.
Yeah.
And it even continues
great,
into Age of Sigmar, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. No, I've seen the Gotrek model for Age of Sigmar. It's funny. I was looking at the comparison. We can actually pull it up right now here. The Age of Sigmar Gotrek.
Oh yeah, he's gorgeous. He's very gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a good model. I mean, it looks like it could be out of Warhammer Fantasy too. You know?
Oh yeah. Well, and he's basically this. Well, he's stronger, which is crazy. But he's stronger now. But if you ever listen to the Age of Sigmar audio dramas, which I highly recommend, once you finish don't do it before you finish Gotrek and Felix. But if you finish Gotrek and Felix, you can start reading listening/reading the Gotrek series in Age of Sigmar. And I think for people who don't like or trust AOS, it is an excellent place to be introduced to the universe because they take the same approach, except for Gotrek's now the main character. So the story is from his perspective of being in this bizarre new world that he generally hates.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting, it's very fun.
Oh man. And the retro models for Felix and Gotrek, I'm looking at those right now. Oh my God. Do you actually own those?
I don't.
Oh dude, they're so good.
You would, the only people who tended to own them were like collectors, White Dwarf enthusiasts, or Dogs of War players.
Got it. Dude, those are some great models. So, I mean, in summary, man, of kind of our discussion on Gotrek and Felix, dude, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's like the best starting place. That's usually what I tell people, and I'm glade to hear that the Lore Master has validated that opinion. And
and if you play Total War, you will get a lot of Easter eggs in your Total War campaigns by reading the Gotrek and Felix books, because whenever you actually pick up Gotrek and Felix, it will give you a lore blurb. Whenever you pick them up, and like Gotrek and Felix will talk about certain things. And if you've read the books, you actually will know what they're talking about and what books the lore blurb is basically telling you just happened, which can be really fun.
Not to go on like a big rant about it, but I really wish they would implement Gotrek as a hero as well. Like, I don't like how he's like the leader of an army. I feel like that's like super out of character for him, right?
Oh yeah, he would never do that.
He would like just never do that. But I mean, yeah, if him and Felix were like heroes that joined your army, that would be incredibly cool, man. But, it was a weird thing. Hopefully they'll get around to I think they'll fix it
at some point.
I think they'll fix it for sure. But that's the first book that the Lore Master of Sotek, the great one, the old one himself, recommends. And next we're going to talk about the Masters of Stone and Steel, which is omnibus focused on the dwarves. So this is another one you recommend, yeah?
Yeah, I think a lot of people tend to be very big dwarf fans, and I will say, kind of
they're passionate people.
Kind of the books we're aiming for here are designed for, like I said, people who are not familiar with the universe, and also to give you good jump off points. Because once you get going, it's not difficult to find a book that you'll really like about a certain particular race or subject. But the reason I recommend Masters of Stone and Steel is that dwarves don't show up in a ton of omnibi. Most of them tend to be focused on elves or humans or vampires. Those are Warriors of Chaos. Those are kind of like the big characters for Warhammer Fantasy. But dwarves have this really excellent one, which is Masters of Stone and Steel. And it is a pretty serious collection of about 6 novels. Some of them are more of short stories, but most of them are full-on novels, and they range from, there's one which I believe is, I want to say it's either Grudgebearer or Honor Keeper, that is, it literally just walks you through the life of one of the Dwarf Kings. The Dwarf King of Zuthbar, it literally starts you from when his prince and his father dies all the way to the modern day.
I think that's Grudgebearer. That was the first one I read, and that's the one that has Grombrindle in it. Oh, dude.
Yeah, Grombrindle does show up in it.
I think that was my favorite. I've only read 3 of them, but Grudgebearer of the 3 I read was really good. I would definitely recommend that as a starting point. And yeah, it has that really nice transition of like the king, and then his son and the ascension to, becoming the king. It's a great book, man.
Yeah, yeah. If you've ever, by the way, if you've ever looked at Gromrindal and you're like, I don't understand why this guy is like what his deal is, that is the perfect book to understand what he does, and kind of why he doesn't really like the reason he's not out there like kicking Malekith in the face is because he has a job he does. But yeah, it's an excellent series of books. It's got a really nice mix because Grudgebearer is kind of an epic. Whereas you have, I want to say it's Oathbreaker, has to do more with a group of dwarves going on an adventure into a fallen hold, and that one's very, that one's very intense and also lets you in on a lot of interesting aspects of dwarven culture. And then there's the Doom of Dragonback, which the Doom of Dragonback is basically a horror novel, because it details the fall of the Dragonback Mountains, which is the hold of Ekrend. If you've ever heard of the Mines of Ekrend, are one of the most important dwarf settlements in the world, and it was taken by greenskins. And this book details how it happened, and it is one of the best books to understand how terrifying a Wa is.
Yeah, because they're usually in a very comedic light, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, greenskins are usually kind of goofy, or like if they are kind of spooky, you're dealing with something that can handle them, and they usually lose. This book helps you understand a situation where the greenskins are just an inevitable tide. Like there is no winning; you're just trying to survive. And it's an excellent read. But it's a great series. That the other thing I really like about it is that I think a weakness that a lot of other fantasy universes tend to suffer from is that their dwarves and elves tend to be like humans with like a little gimmick. Like dwarves tend to just be like short humans that are good at craftsmanship, or elves tend to be just humans that live for a really long time and maybe they're kind of arrogant. In Warhammer, like through Masters of Stone and Steel, you will understand that Warhammer dwarves are not remotely human. Like they have a very different view of the world. And some of the stuff they do from our perspective would be completely insane.
Yeah.
Or like
the Slayer culture, for example.
Slayer culture.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly which one of these books it is, but one of these books like goes very heavily into rune lore. And if I recall correctly, I'm not sure about this version of Masters of Stone and Steel. I'd have to look at it because I have a different version of it because they re-released this one a few times. But generally at the end of this book, there is they usually have something called grudge lore, which has a lot of really cool like historical events from the race, and they even have like blurbs at the back that understand how to speak the language, how to write the language.
That's cool.
Like it gets really in depth, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite. I mean, I'm up to maybe the 6th book in the Gotrek and Felix series, and I've read 3 of these stories. And I mean, I'm a huge dwarf fan, and for anyone who is a dwarf fan out there, you are gonna love this. And yeah, you're making me want to read the Fall of the Doom of Dragonback for sure.
Doom of Dragonback is it's a good bummer, but it's really good.
Yeah.
It's not a happy story though.
Are there any like really noteworthy characters or like Easter eggs that Total War Warhammer players would recognize? I mean, we do have the Dragonback Slayers as one of the RORs, right?
Right. So it's more that it's a good book to read if you like the dwarves or the greenskins, because it kind of details, you'll understand why that mine is so important.
Yeah.
Because it actually lets you see the mine when it's fully operational and just like the sheer volume of goodies they were producing.
Yeah.
But you learn a lot about miners, and you will come to understand why the Ekrend clans have been obsessed, even thousands of years later, with trying to retake their ancestral home, and why it's such like a nasty sticking point for the dwarves that they still don't have Ekrend.
Is it like the Mines of Moria in Warhammer Fantasy? Like, how
No, the Mines of Moria are more like those relate more to Carrick Ungor, which is way up in the north. The Ekrend is kind of more like the Hobbit.
Yeah, the Misty Mountains. Yeah.
Without the dragon.
There's something.
There is. Carrick Asgal had the dragon, which instead of Smog the Terrible, it was Grog the Terrible.
Really? It was just that straight up?
Yes, it was that straight up.
That's funny, dude.
But that was a very different story. There were no hobbits involved in that one. It was the single dwarf that killed that dragon. But Ekrend is So instead of reading The Hobbit from the perspective of, oh, we've lost our home and we're going to take it back, imagine if The Hobbit was written from the perspective of the dwarves having a normal day, and then Smaug shows up and the entire book is about Smaug killing everybody.
Yeah.
That's the doom of Dragonback.
So it's kind of like a Last Stand scenario, huh?
Yeah, it is a last stand / trying to get the women and children out situation.
Damn.
And it is the best book ever written for Warhammer Fantasy that shows how terrifying greenskins are.
Yeah.
Because I won't spoil when it happens in the book or what like causes this event to occur, but there is a moment in the book where one of the dwarf characters sees the entire wall, and it is a truly special literary moment.
Yeah.
Like the whole book is building up to you seeing the wall, and when you finally see it, you're like, these guys are fucked. Yeah. Like there's no winning here. I don't care how tough and brave and honorable you are. You're boned.
And that really puts perspective on some other like historical events from Warhammer Fantasy, right? Like the Battle of Blackfire Pass with Sigmar, and then with Franz, and like what it truly took to hold back like the Greenskin Wa at its pinnacle, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like occasionally you'll read a story, or like you'll hear something if you're playing like Total War or whatever, where it's like, oh, the Strigoi vampires had the Empire of Strigoi that dominated the Badlands, and then they got wiped out by a Wa. Well, this book will put into perspective what they were going up against and why even like all of the vampires under Ushoran didn't really stand a chance.
Yeah, I remember reading the Grudge Bearer and like hearing the dwarves like lament about how their people have like, it's kind of like part of their culture at this point to just like lament and like woe about how their kingdom and how their people have fallen.
They love stewing in misery.
Yeah, just like drinking, just drinking and complaining.
Yeah, they're sad drunks.
Yeah,
yes, and that's a big. You'll learn one. I think probably the best thing you'll learn is if you ever wonder why Longbeards give immune to psychology to nearby dwarves, or not immune to psychology, but the leadership buff.
Yeah,
the reason they give that leadership buff called Old Grumblers is because they're basically just bitching the entire time they're on the battlefield about how things are a lot bigger and scarier back in the old days and nothing's the way it used to be.
Yeah.
And all the dwarves around them are scared of getting called out. And if you read these books, you will come to understand why dwarves tend to be scared of Longbeards.
They're so badass, man. There's this really cool battle scene I remember vividly in one of the books where like the Skaven are like trying to backdoor this dwarven kingdom, but then the king rallies out to meet them, and it's like this huge underground battle, and how they use iron breakers to like clear tunnels, like just these badass like cave fighters. Yeah, it's a great series, man. And these are the only two I've actually read of all the ones, or at least touched upon, that you've shared with, and the ones you would really recommend. So I'm quite eager to get to the next one as well. But if you were to like say, for Masters of Stone and Steel, we have Grudgebearer, Oathkeeper, Oathbreaker, Honor Keeper, Doom of Dragonback, Ancestral Grudge, and City of Jewels. Which like first two would you recommend? Like where do they start, or which ones would you say are like these are the best?
I would start with Grudgebearer.
Yeah, that's the Grumbrindle one. Yeah.
Yeah, Grudgebearer is it just walks you through the life of a dwarf, and it helps you understand how they feel about humans, why they feel the way that they do about humans. It explains a little bit about their feeling towards well, first of all, you get to see halflings.
Yeah, the halflings. That's very early on.
You actually get to see a halfling army. It is as horrible as you would expect.
Dude, that's I think that's my favorite scene in the book. One of them, like when there's a scene where there's like a halfling army, a human army, and a dwarf army like together, and dude, that scene is so comical. It's so good, dude.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. So you'll get to learn a lot about halflings, which I always encourage people to do, because comparing the noble hobbits of the Lord of the Rings to the degenerate halflings of Warhammer is pretty special.
I love that so much.
Warhammer definitely makes fun of Lord of the Rings very heavily when it comes to their halflings.
Yeah.
But you get to learn about halflings, you get to learn about all the trials that a king's face, and like a lot of the restrictions and like nasty things dwarves have to deal with. You get to learn a lot about how they feel towards humans as well.
Yeah, that relationship's interesting.
Yeah, there is a very notable portion of the book. Well, not portion, but there's two excellent chapters that are basically dedicated to the king's relationship to a particular imperial province. or city,
Mhm.
and it's a really interesting story because from as a human, when you're reading it, you understand what's going on. You're like, okay, I totally get this, but it explains it from the dwarf perspective about how he's totally baffled about why the humans are acting the way they're acting in that situation.
Hmm.
And it's very interesting. But you get to learn a lot about grudges too, and
Yeah.
like, I mean, you'll literally there's literally scenes where the dwarves get angry at something and they declare a grudge, and you'll be like, man, I can't wait for them to avenge this. And then the next chapter is like 50 years later and they're finally going to deal with it, and like the people they're mad at aren't even alive anymore, but
Yeah,
they're
they're
still
children.
going. Yeah, it's like, so you'll get to see a lot of like the just the spitefulness of the dwarves as well, which is a lot of fun. And it's funny, you would think that a lot of people would dislike the dwarves less reasonable parts, but I think a lot of people actually sympathize and really enjoy how over the top Warhammer dwarves can be about those kinds of situations.
Yeah, the grudge system is absolutely absurd, and it's certainly in Grudgebearer. It's like a major focal point of the first couple chapters once things get going. But yeah, Grudgebearer is amazing, and I mean, it sounds like from what you were describing, the Doom of Dragonback would be like the second one you would say to like, because
Yeah,
that's like the dark side.
I would probably just go through it in order,
Mhm.
honestly. But if you wanted to jump from like best to least best, I'd probably go from Grudgebreaker to the Doom of Dragonback, maybe go to Oathbreaker.
Yeah.
But it's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, and Gav Thorpe is actually the author who wrote both Grudgebearer and the Doom of Dragonback, so it sounds like he's got a decent track record there.
Oh yeah, he's great. I love Gav Thorpe. He does a great job.
So the next book we're going to touch on, and this is another omnibus, I'm guessing. Yeah,
yes, these are all omnibuses.
The Sundering. So what is the Sundering about?
So the Sundering is the civil war that broke out between the High Elves and the Dark Elves.
So when they like splintered off?
Yeah, technically, the Sundering is kind of a funny omnibus from like a history of Black Library perspective, because it used to be sold to people as the Malekith trilogy.
Oh.
Which is not accurate. Like, Malekith is involved in every book because Malekith is at the heart of the Sundering.
Yeah.
But each book follows a different character. So the first book is entirely about Malekith and basically builds up to the Sundering.
Is it from his perspective?
Yes, so he's the main character.
Got it.
And it's before the Sundering, so it's about him and Snorri Whitebeard meeting. Like,
and Snorri is Grombrindle, right?
Yes, Snorri's Grombrindle before he died.
Yeah.
So it's about him like meeting the dwarves and being best friends with Snorri Whitebeard.
It's the Bro Alliance. Yeah.
You actually come to know Malekith as Malekith the hero.
Yeah.
Like, you will probably come to genuinely love him as a character and be amazed with like how awesome his feats are, and learn how much of a bitch Morathi is, and like why she's just kind of the worst. Like, she's very powerful,
yeah,
and she's kind of always up to something, but you kind of learn why she is as much of a problem as she is.
I love how blunt you are about Morathi.
Well, yeah, like, I love her as a character, but she's just the worst.
She's horrible. It's horrible.
But
why is she so bad? Like, what is her worst traits? Like, what does she do that's just so awful?
So the thing about Morathi is that if it wasn't for Morathi, Malekith never would have turned evil. And that's what the book helps you understand.
So she's like the Palpatine to Darth Malekith.
She is the Palpatine, except for she is his mother.
Okay. Complicates things.
She's so interested in power by any means, and that's kind of the thing you learn about her that I love about her, but also hate about her. Is that Morathi believes in acquiring power by any means necessary.
Got it.
She has no morals. If Morathi has to make a bargain with the dark gods in order to get a little bit extra juice, she's going to do it. If Morathi has to murder an orphanage so that she can be a little more pretty, she's going to do it. Yeah. Like, she doesn't care. And the book is really interesting because you get to follow Malekith's journey from being Malekith the hero to Malekith the Witch King.
Yeah.
So like, you follow that entire story. And I believe the story ends with him becoming the Witch King. So you're going to watch him.
That's a capstone, man. That must be a pretty epic moment, huh?
Oh, it's great. Like, you're going to watch him talk to and end up murdering the Phoenix King. You watch him murder all of the other princes of Ulthuan except for one who conveniently wasn't there. You watch him go after Morathi when he comes back to Ulthuan because he found out she's been leading a cult of pleasure. She's basically been like bringing in all this horrible worship of these terrible gods.
Yeah.
So Malekith ends up going on a secret war against the cult of pleasure, and it ends up building up to him fighting his mother. He has this epic confrontation with Morthy where they fight each other. And he ends up and that whole thing happens, and it's a wild ride.
Damn.
But I think for a lot of people who like think that Malekith is just like a whiny baby who complains too much about the fact that he didn't get to be Phoenix King, or you hear about all the memes about him and Morthy and stuff, it's a good book to read that actually gets you to see Malekith in a fair light, and understand that although what he ended up doing was definitely not what he should have done, you can understand why he did it.
Yeah.
And then the second book is about Elithanar.
Oh, is he the main character?
Yes. So it follows Elithanar's life story. Well, not his life story, but the story of how he becomes the Shadow King.
Yeah.
So Malekith is the villain in the second book, but he's a little more distant, and you get to learn why Elithanar goes from being a happy-go-lucky child to being like one of the most vengeful, bitter,
vengeance incarnate.
elves.
Yeah.
Like he's Batman, except for he really likes killing people by crucifying them on walls.
It sounds like he's like the Punisher. He's like the Punisher.
Yeah, he's like the Punisher. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you get to follow that story in the second book, and then the third book is about Kalidor the First, who is the Phoenix King that takes over after Malekith kills Belshazzar.
After they splinter, basically.
Yeah, and that book, the ending battle is amazing, because the final battle is when Kalidor the First on his big dragon fights Malekith on his big dragon.
Oh, dude, that sounds metal.
It's the final battle of the Sundering.
Yeah.
And it is wild.
Yeah, dude. That sounds... I might have to go read this. Like, normally I'm kind of like, I'm not interested in elvish things, but the relationship between Malekith and the dwarves, his ascension to the Witch King, big dragon battles, Morathi being a troll, and also, I had no idea that Elithanar was involved in this narrative as well. So that's
Elithanar has the thing about Elithanar is that he was basically a very prominent noble family within a elven kingdom called Naggareth.
Yeah.
And Naggareth is Malekith's home province. And when Malekith turned against the High Elves, or when the Civil War started and Malekith declared himself the Witch King, the most of the Naggarathi, or Naggarithi, I guess Naggaroth would be later.
Yeah, close enough.
But the people of Naggareth, 99% of them sided with Malekith, but Elithanar's family was loyal to the Phoenix throne. So you can imagine bad things happened. And Elithanar was the only survivor.
So the faction that we play in Total War Warhammer of Elithanar is like, that's that 1% that you're playing, right?
Yeah, they are the leftovers of Naggareth. They are a people who lost everything when Malekith turned evil. And the best part of the Sundering series is you get to see the actual event known as the Sundering, which I don't want to spoil exactly how it occurs, but Malekith does something as like a big Hail Mary that ends up causing about a third of Ulthuan to be completely destroyed.
Got it.
So there's basically a notable portion of the book that's a disaster movie where you're watching tsunamis and earthquakes and volcanoes erupting, and like thousands of people are dying in agony.
It's like California right now.
More or less. A little worse, but yeah. And you'll get to see why Ulthuan, the way it looks now, you'll actually get to know and be... I find it rather haunting, but especially the outer kingdoms, so the kingdoms on the outside, used to be about twice as big before Malekith did his whole thing.
Yeah, man. That sounds like a great series. I might have to order that one. God, I have so many books I have to get through. I'm reading 40K books and fantasy books at the same time. It's just, there's so much good stuff. But yeah, the Sundering sounds fun. I mean, so you got Morathi, you got Malekith, you got Elithanar, you have the Kalidor, as you mentioned. Is there any other characters that are like super noteworthy who are mentioned and or who appear in that series? Or are those really the main big boys there?
Those are the main draws, but you will see a couple of characters who you'll see some interesting moments. Like when Elithanar meets Lalaith, who is one of the elven gods. That's a pretty big moment for future situations.
Yeah, it's awesome, man.
Yeah, so that's a pretty good mix to kind of give a lot of different races while kind of giving people a starting point.
No, it's good because it like, the first series, Gotrek and Felix, touches upon Empire dwarves, Skaven. Then the second series, High Elves, Dark Elves, with a little bit of dwarvish kind of, with the relationship with Snorri. And yeah, I mean, it seems like it's covering our bases. And now, for the next one, we haven't really gone to the true dark side yet. The next book you suggested for individuals getting ready was the Warhammer Chronicles Champions of Chaos. So tell us what this one's all about, man. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so the Champions of Chaos it's essentially a collection of 3 stories. When you open the book, it may look like there's a lot of stories, but it's really only 3.
Okay.
And it just details the life stories of, well, not the life stories, but the prominent life events of 3 Champions of Chaos, which are Sigvald the Magnificent is the first book.
The classic.
And that details his full life story, leading up to like modern day-ish. So you get to learn about how Sigvald became the way he is. You get to see his ascension to being Slaanesch's adopted son. You get to see him meet Slaanesh. You get to watch him fight Galrach, the first of the Chaos Dragons. That's a really cool scene.
Yeah.
And you also get to meet his wife, who is horrifying.
Is she human?
She is human, but she's not a great person.
I mean, come on, it's Sigvald. Like, what do you expect, man?
Like, she's gorgeous. She's a very strange character because you will feel bad for her, even though she's also just as bad as.
What's her name?
Oh God, I don't remember her name off the top of my head.
Like I've never heard of her mentioned.
I talk about her in my Sigvald video, but I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But she was basically like one of the most beautiful women in the world. And Sigvald literally like butchered her entire nation,
just
or like her entire city, to earn her hand in marriage. She's not, but it's funny because she's just as degenerate as Sigvald.
Yeah, so it worked out great.
Yeah, so
match made in heaven.
They have a very messed up love.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Sigvald actually comes from like the Norscan tribes, right?
Yeah, Sigvald is
It's hard to believe he's like a marauder, like comes from that Norscan culture, right? Because he's like so pristine with hair in his armor.
You'll learn why that is.
Is he more like rugged when you first meet him? Does he have like a little bit of a beard and like some?
No, he's vaguely close to what you remember him like, because he is favored by Slaanesh. Like when he was born with a sigil of Slaanesh on his body. Yeah. But you will learn more about why he is like absurdly beautiful, so to speak.
Got it.
Because that's a big part of his relationship with Slaanesh and another entity who I don't want to reveal.
No spoilers.
But then you have Valkia the Bloody, which that isn't
who is she? Who is she? What is she? We don't have her in the game yet. Hopefully we get her at some point.
So Valkia is the person on the cover if you buy this omnibus. And Valkia the Bloody is Khorne, who's the god of blood and god of murder and battle.
God of war. Basically.
She is his consort. So she is his like beloved.
Oh,
so
shit.
Khorne's favorite thing in the universe is Valkia.
Oh shit.
And Valkia was a mortal woman of the Norscan tribes. I don't remember exactly which tribe, but I think she was Norscan. She might have been cool, but she was a Northman who this book details her entire life story. So it's from birth until modern day, essentially.
Because she doesn't always look like she looks on the cover, right?
No. She was human. Yeah.
Okay.
She started off human and very pretty and all this stuff. And you learn about her basically becoming a warrior, dominating her tribe, dominating all these other tribes. And her thing is she basically she attracts the attention of a demon prince of Slaanesh, who is like her big antagonist.
Yeah.
And so you get to see this epic battle between her and this demon prince that literally lasts for days.
That's awesome.
Of just a one-on-one fight.
So it's like a Dragon Ball Z episode, remember?
Yeah, essentially. and then you follow her quest to she embarks on a pretty much impossible quest. And it is impossible. She ends up dying on her quest. But Khorne ends up remaking her into the Valkia we know. Which the fun thing about the book is when you read the Valkia the Bloody book, it ends with her becoming that. essentially kind of a demon princess.
Yeah, you can see on the cover more or less that happens.
But then there are 3 short stories following it, which are 4 short stories, which are Blood Raven, Blood Blessing, Reaper, and Harbinger, and those are all about Valkia aftermath. So those are all about Valkia after she becomes a chosen Valkyrie of Khorne, and it's nuts. Like you get to see her at full power.
Would you say that the books and the Champions of Chaos, so we have Sigvald, we have Valkia, those we could focus on those 2 for now. Would you say they like kind of give you that, because obviously a lot of books, like when they're portraying chaos from the perspective of a hero or or of a quote unquote good guy, it's kind of just like these mindless kind of
yeah, there are no good guys in these books.
Would you say though, like the perspective is dynamic? It's not just like you kind of like understand where they're coming from, or is it just kind of like I'm evil, I'm Khorne, like hack slash?
They do a really good job of explaining their culture, and you will meet other characters who kind of act as good foils to them.
Yeah.
So like when you read Sigvald's book, Sigvald's always a degenerate. Like he's always he just
always sucks. Yeah.
But you will learn a lot about him because of the characters around him.
Yeah.
They kind of help provide a perspective on why he is the way he is. And you learn there are human elements to Sigvald, and there are some parts of him that you'll probably come to pity a lot.
Yeah.
But there are also scenes where he just cuts loose and you're like
nope.
Awesome. Like this guy's horrible. But like you can indulge in his horribleness.
Yeah.
Valkia is much more a situation where they help you understand her culture.
Yeah.
And you will become very wrapped up in her journey, and you will want her to succeed.
Yeah.
Like she's almost kind of like an anti-hero. Like she ends up going a little far off the deep end, and you start being like, whoa, stop. And it just kind of doesn't. It just kind of going.
Sounds like chaos in a nutshell.
Yeah. Like the big thing for Valkia is when I read it, there is a build-up where you will really love her character and want her to succeed, and then she ends up. I don't want to say when, but there is a point where if you're really wrapped up in the story, she definitely becomes the villain to her own story.
Copy that.
And you feel it gets very conflicted feeling. Like you're gonna be sitting there like, I don't know who to root for. I'm in this situation because I like this character, but I also really like Valkia. But Valkia is just like trying to murder everybody right now.
So
the last one is Egron von Horseman, which is
go ahead.
Egron von Horseman is a champion of Tzeentch. So this book essentially gives you a champion of Slaanesh, a champion of Khorne, and a champion of Tzeentch.
Got it.
As each of the books. And Van Horseman is definitely the most intriguing. It's almost like it's almost like a mystery, as opposed to a battle book. There are a lot of really amazing scenes, and it does help illustrate how magic works. It has a massive focus on how the winds of magic work and how wizards work in Warhammer. And you'll get to see some of the Imperial colleges. Like you get to see the Imperial College of Light, the Imperial College of Metal, I think the Imperial College of Fire. You get to see how wizards like settle disputes. You get to see him interacting with demons.
No.
But Van Horseman is a character who does not want to serve chaos. He is someone that has made a bargain with Tzeentch to achieve a goal that you will learn at the end of the book. That is heartbreaking, and will make you feel for him very, very much. But he is someone that basically gambles against the dark gods, and you get to see how it plays out.
It sounds like Magnus from Warhammer 40k. They have Magnus, the Red of the Thousand Suns. And he does like the exact same thing. He makes a deal with Tzeentch to like protect his children, basically, and it's like,
yeah, it's very similar to that, but it does have a lot of really cool like cameo scenes. Like you get to see Teclis.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you get to see Teclis founding the colleges of magic. You get to see Volans, which Volans was the first ever Supreme Patriarch.
So it takes place like a couple hundred years before.
So the first. I'll say this just because it's the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
The first chapter introduces you to the founding of the colleges. So you meet Volans and you meet the first patriarch of every college. So you meet the first badass death wizard, life wizard, light wizard, shadow wizard, etc.
Hell yeah.
But the reason you meet them is because they're fighting a chaos dragon named Baldros. And Baldros is a chaos dragon who has a very peculiar mutation that makes him invulnerable.
No.
So
Sounds OP.
Yeah, he cannot die. He's invincible. So you will. I don't want to go into what part Baldros plays in the story, but Baldros is very significant. If you know anything about Egrim von Horseman, you'll probably know what Baldros' deal is. The two of them are very bound together, but the story takes place fairly recently. Like I want to say it was like maybe only 100 years ago at most.
Yeah. So it's before like the reign of Karl Franz as emperor, and
yeah. Karl Franz is an emperor. It's a little ways before that.
Got it.
Because you'll get to see some interesting patriarchs. Like you'll get to see a wizard duel between some of the colleges. And it's a pretty good time.
It's funny, just in these like 10 minutes we've been talking, I'm just like foaming at the mouth to see Valkia as well as this character, Mr. Horseman, implemented into the game because they sound so cool. Like in Chaos is just such an outdated roster as far as our current game goes. So I'm just like, give it to us.
Oh yeah, and I'm really glad they picked the books they did, just because the relationship each of them has with Chaos is very different.
Yeah.
Or like Sigvald is very much a spoiled brat who already has a lot of power.
Yeah.
Like by the time you meet Sigvald, he already has like a colossal floating castle and like is one of Slanesh's favorite boys.
Yeah.
But his journey is more about trying to maintain his power or achieve more power than he already has. Valkia's story is about watching the ascension of someone who was born into a chaos culture from birth all the way into ascension. And then Van Horseman is about watching someone trying to who lives in the Empire, trying to manipulate chaos to their own ends without actually serving the dark
without
power.
Paying the troll toll in the end.
Yeah, like Van Horseman, the literal last act of that book is like a jailbreak scene of him trying to get away from Tzeentch.
Yeah. Damn, that sounds cool, man. Because I've always I play Chaos in 40k, and obviously I always like Chaos and Fantasy too. But yeah, I want to read these, man. If you were to pick a favorite from this series, from this Champions of Chaos, like which one would you say is like the boss hog for you?
I think Sigvald was my favorite.
Yeah.
Just because I don't know exactly why. Van Horseman was a lot of fun. I think I enjoyed Sigvald more, but I might be a little biased because Galroch shows up in it, and Galroch.
You just like big dragons and monsters.
Yeah, Galroch is probably my favorite Chaos character because he's literally the first of the Chaos Dragons.
Yeah, come on, it's fair play, man.
And the scene with him is incredible. Yeah. Like Sigvald fighting him, I was literally like sweating. I was enjoying. It was like such a good scene.
Knees weak, palms sweaty, reading some Sigvald battles, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah, but there's a lot of good little books to pick up. But yeah, so like if you're looking for like a good place for Chaos to start, you can start there. There also is another one called The Warriors of the Chaos Waste, which is fairly similar. It just features different characters.
You said that's called Warriors of the Chaos Waste?
Yeah, that one is more about people that are already like neck deep.
Yeah, they're just balls deep in the chaos already.
So it has like 2 stories exploring the realm of chaos, and then the first story is Wulfric. So if you want to know Wulfric's life story, you can read that one.
Yeah, looking right now, the contents of that book are Wulfric, Blood for the Blood God, which I assume is just like a Cornate Warrior kind of novel, and then Palace of the Plague Lord, right? It's a Nurgle kind of business. Blood
for the Blood God follows a character called Skulltaker, who you should be familiar with from 40k. He is a special character, Demon of Khorne, Herald of Khorne. He's like a bloodletter special character.
Got it. They have a whole novel about that, huh?
Yeah. It follows him, basically going on a journey to try and claim somebody's skull, and then the last book is about a big contest involving some Norskins and Nurgle.
It sounds like but definitely, I mean, of the two, you would definitely recommend the Champions of Chaos. It sounds like you're getting some.
I would start with the Champions of Chaos. What you definitely, if you like Wulfric or you like Norska, I would really recommend picking up Warriors of Chaos Waste. If you're like, man, I just want to know about Norska, I would start with Warriors of the Chaos Waste Omnibus. If you're like, I want to know about Chaos, like the Warriors of Chaos, pick up Champions of Chaos.
Got it. Yeah, it looks like fun, man. It's definitely gonna have to add it to the docket. I'm actually painting a bunch of Khorne Berserkers right now on tabletop, so I'm like just feeding for a little bit of chaos literature.
Valkia would be the perfect background to that.
Yeah, man, they're such cool models. I actually picked up the Blood Warriors from Age of Sigmar, the Blades of Khorne. Dude,
yeah.
Those models are so freaking good because I'm used to just like absolute jank. Like, let me show you guys. I know you won't be able to see it, Sotek, but I'll talk you through it.
It's okay. I know what models you're talking
about. Dude, the
Khorne
Berserkers from 40k are just such an atrocity. Like, they're so bad looking, dude. Oh my god. But if you get like Blood Warriors, let me show you guys. Blood Warriors. AOS. I guess I could just search.
Yeah, the Blood Warriors are pretty. They've been juicing.
Dude, they are heavy metal. Just freaking biceps flaring. Just have these huge battle axes. They're really cool. But what's really neat about these, if you guys do play, 40k, is you can convert these really easily into 40k Khorne Berserkers. You literally cut one of the arms and put a freaking chainsword on it and a backpack, and that's it. And suddenly you have like really good Berserkers for 40k. But dude. Yeah, I definitely I would probably start with Valkia. I think that sounds like a pretty cool story. And I've always like had the impression that like Khorne characters are just kind of like the stories wouldn't be that interesting. But from how you told it, it makes me kind of want to dive in because I've never really touched on the lore of the lore of a Khorne character before.
The thing I liked a lot about Valkia is that it's not a story about like a berserker that just keeps berserking until they become big. Valkia
That's what I was worried about. Yeah,
Valkia deals with a lot of struggles because she's like, she's a woman in a Norscan culture, which causes her some issues. When she takes over her tribe, there's a lot of not politicking, but there's a lot of issues she has to deal with. And then, of course, the more power she builds, the more attention she draws, which draws challenges.
Yeah.
And she ends up attracting the attention of that demon prince, which is a crazy showdown.
That must be such a cool battle. And she's obviously on the cover, it's obvious she eventually becomes that. But at that point, when she duels the demon prince, is she a human still? Or is
she's a human. Mm-hmm.
That's badass, dude.
Like she's a champion of Khorne, so she's not a slouch. She's beyond human powerful.
Yeah.
But she literally goes up against like a very strong demon prince of Slaanesh.
It'd be interesting to see like obviously in 40k, like I have knowledge of like the differences between Slaanesh demons and Khorne demons and like how they fight and whatnot, but because I always feel like, obviously the Khorne characters are represented in Total War with like the frenzy mechanic, right? And just like, damage and aggression, and it seems like the Slaanesh characters are more like finesse fighters, right? Is that how it's kind of represented in this book as well?
It depends on the character.
Yeah.
When you get the big fight between Valkia and I can't remember his name, but the demon prince she fights.
Mm-hmm.
Valkia's, I would not describe Valkia as like wild berserker fury because she wields Sleipnir, which is her spear.
Yeah.
She has a very awesome fighting style.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun to witness. Now, the thing she goes up against, the Demon Prince, his whole deal, of course, being a Slaanesh champion, is that he's like, well, his equipment is hilariously magical, so it's got like a lot of bizarre, crazy
cheating
effects.
Yeah.
But he has some horrifying powers that result in Valkia's tribe basically getting obliterated.
Damn.
And he is exceedingly skilled and exceedingly fast is his thing.
Yeah.
Very, very quick despite his size.
It's like that in 40k too. Like the Emperor's Children, Space Marines, like when they become corrupted, they're like super quick, proficient, tactical, fighters. So it sounds like, the speed and agility is kind of something reflected in fantasy as well.
Yeah, he's a very interesting character. And like the only reason he even shows up is because he basically hears about Valkia and he shows up to offer her like pleasure unimaginable, and she just hates him on sight because Valkia is like very dedicated to her cause.
Well, Khorne hates Slaanesh, right?
Yeah, they hate each other more than anything else.
Yeah, so.
And when the two of them meet, you get to see why. Like they are both a perfect embodiment of why they clash so hard. And his whole thing is that he basically wants to wife her really hard. Like he wants her to be his concubine.
She ain't having that shit. Yeah.
And she is No, like not interested. But of course, being a Celeste champion, he does not take no for an answer.
Does he appear as like some Haggard demon with like horns and like wings, or is he
Not
like human looking sort of?
not when they first meet. When they first meet, if I recall correctly, he has a very big thing with illusions.
Got it.
That is a whole deal that happens with his when she fights him.
Makes sense.
He does not go all in until they like really start going at it, and it's a pretty wild ride.
Then he becomes all scary. Yeah, so Champion of the Chaos Wastes. Here it is. You guys can see the omnibus, of course. And if you guys have any questions, obviously pertaining to any of these books, feel free to leave a comment in the section below. I'm sure Sotek or I will do our best to get to it. And now there was another book, which is actually not on the Games Workshop website or the Black Library, which was called Skaven Wars, the Black Plague Trilogy. So what is the jam with that? What time period is it in? Who are the characters? Just kind of
Yeah, so the Skaven Wars so in our world we had the Black Plague. Same thing happened in the Warhammer Fantasy world, except for the Black Plague was caused by the Skaven. So basically, this follows a massive war that takes place where the Skaven basically, so it's about 1,000 years into the Empire's timeline. So about 1,500 years ago.
Okay. Like from current Total War Warhammer time?
From current Total War Warhammer time. And you're basically the story basically follows the Empire is a complete wreck.
Yeah.
And because it's under control of an emperor named Boris Goldgather, who is just
sounds greedy.
Yeah, he's not great.
Yeah.
And because the Empire is very, very weak due to significant amounts of greed and corruption and cowardice, he, like Karl Franz says in his little speech in his Total War Warhammer movie, he was very much talking about Boris.
Yeah.
The Skaven decide the time is right to launch their invasion on the Empire.
Yeah.
So the trilogy is a ton of fun because it follows 3 fascinating perspectives. You follow the perspectives of the Skaven, who it's basically you follow a Gracier and you follow Clan Pestilence, and they are not allies. But basically Clan Pestilence makes a move to take over Skavendom and the Empire. They create the Black Plague. They unleash it on the Empire to devastating effect. 3/4 of the Empire is killed by this disease.
Jeez.
And the Skaven stop hiding themselves. Like they completely come above ground and invade and conquer cities and a bunch of territory and all this other stuff. So like the Skaven are fully revealed.
Yeah.
And you get to watch as Clan Pestilence basically starts taking over the Council of 13. They go from having 1 seat on the council to having 3 seats on the council. You get to see a lot of Skaven politics and scheming and how they create and do a lot of things. You get to see how the rat ogres were invented. So like the very first debut of the rat ogres.
Oh boy, I bet that's pretty epic.
It is. It actually is you get to see when Clan Mulder takes over their spot on the council, because there was actually a clan. There was a clan that specialized in a different kind of monster that actually was considered the true Beastmaster clan, and then Clan Mulder unveils the rat ogre and usurps them, and it's an excellent scene because you get to see this beast clan that's so proud of their pet throw their pets into an arena against a rat
gladiator.
Ogre. And it's a gladiator fight between a rat ogre and this other colossal monster.
Just rat Pokemon. Oh, that's cool.
And it's a lot of fun. You also get to witness the rise of Van Hal. Van Hal is one of the most powerful necromancers to ever live since Nagash. You get to learn his story, which is very, very sad and is very wrapped into the Black Plague. And Van Hal ends up taking over Sylvania, and he becomes the necromancer Van Hal, who created the spell Van Hal's Dance Macabre. But you get to follow his story of going from being a priest of Mor, the god of death,
right? Yeah.
To being one of the most powerful necromancers to ever exist.
So he's in action during the invasion of the Skaven, correct? And I'm guessing that is he kind of like an anti-hero character who uses the death?
Yes, he is. Nobody is on his side, and he's on nobody's side. The Skaven attack him, which leads to one of the most famous feats of necromancy ever recorded. where I won't explain how he did it. All I'll say is there's a scene where you get to see one of the strongest Skaven clans in existence versus 20 zombie dragons.
Dude, that sounds metal.
It is
man.
very metal.
Yeah. Which book is that? Is that in the Blighted Empire, Dead Winter?
I don't remember.
It's somewhere in there. Got it.
Yeah, I want to say it takes place during Blighted Empire, but it might take place during the Wolf of Sigmar. But you get to watch, and then from the Empire perspective, you follow the story of Mandred Skaven Slayer, who ends up becoming emperor after the war. But Mandred Skaven Slayer is the Elector Count of Middenheim.
Okay.
And you get to watch his journey from being just a young man who lives in Middenheim to leading the Empire against the Skaven invasion. And there are a lot of other races that show up. You see dwarves, you see the Wood Elves.
Oh yeah,
the Wood Elves of Laralorn show up. You get to see like the early relationship the Empire has with magic back when it was very, very outlawed, but they kind of needed it. Yeah. You get to see a very special set of creatures known as the Children of Ulrich, which are basically werewolves.
Dude, hell yeah.
Which they're werewolves that are not skin wolves, so they're good guy werewolves, not bad guy werewolves.
Can they shift back, or are they like stuck?
Yeah. They can shift back and forth. And you also get to learn why the Cult of Ulrich does not like them very much, and has a very tense relationship with them. You get to watch Mandred's struggles of trying to balance the Sigmarite faith against the Ulrican faith, because they have a lot of problems with each other.
Yeah.
So you get to watch their religions clash. You get to watch how the Empire handles having a corrupt emperor. So there's a lot of crazy shit that happens with Boris Goldgather and the people that are trying to usurp him and get rid of him, and his attempts to remain a tyrant, and how he tries to manipulate various factions, including the dwarves, to do his bidding. So you get to see the dwarves caught in a weird culture war between the humans that they're not very fond of being involved in.
Yeah.
It's a wild ride. But
sounds like a great series, man. Damn, I never even knew about this one.
It is, and the best part about the Black Plague is you get to see how the Skaven lose in the end, because it is not the Skaven definitely kill themselves.
That happens in every time the Skaven appear. They're on the brink of victory, and then they backstab each other. There's always something. Yeah,
you'll get to see how the Black Plague went down from being the Skaven had a guaranteed victory to a colossal fuck up.
It sounds like 20 zombie dragons might do the trick too. I mean, to be fair.
Well, yeah, it's such a perfectly timed series, because you get to see the rise and fall of all of these characters. You get to see the rise and fall of Mandred Skaven Slayer. You get to see the rise and fall of Van Hal. You get to see the rise and fall of Clan Pestilence and the Skaven. So don't get too attached to any characters.
Yeah, that's some good advice. And yeah, it's funny because this takes place about 1500 years before where we are in Total War Warhammer, right? And yeah, like where we are now, like obviously there's all the running jokes about Skaven not existing. The average Imperial citizen doesn't believe they exist, right? Even after this happened.
Yes. So yeah, Mandred Skaven Slayer, thousands of years later, is now called Mandred Rat. I think he's called Mandred Rat Slayer.
And they just think he drove out rats that caused the plague, like regular rats.
Or something. Like nobody thinks he's a big deal. Yeah. And in this book, you'll learn what a tragedy that is, because he is a badass.
Dude. Yeah, these are great recommendations, man. I think I'm going to run and probably order some of these bad boys too. But now,
I will say there's basically a quick head taker character that Mandred duels. It's in the last book. It is a great fight,
dude. We live for scenes like that. And something I wanted to ask you, like in the research I've kind of done on books, and before we close up today's episode, Lizardmen, like obviously they're your favorite faction. Where are they represented in literature? Okay, do you ever get a perspective for them?
Yeah, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna go. I'm just gonna give like a 1-sentence blurb.
Yeah.
But for everyone that's like, man, I haven't heard my favorite race mentioned, I will just tell you what book to get.
Do it. Let's bang them out, bro.
So if you want to read a book that has Lizardman perspectives and is very well written, you want to pick up the Thanquol Omnibus.
Okay.
The Thanquol Omnibus. The second story is called the Temple of the Serpent.
Okay.
and it's about the him versus a prophet of Sotek, not Tehenwan, but a different character. That one's pretty crazy. If you're looking to, if you want to read about ogres, Gotrek and Felix is not a bad place to be, but I would also recommend there are some short stories like The Great Maw is a good place to go, which details the very first ever prophet of the Maw and his whole relationship there. You can also pick other books I would recommend if you want to know more about what happened between the dwarves and the elves. You can always pick up the
War of the Beard
or Vengeance. If you want to know more about the modern empire, I would recommend either picking up Knights of the Empire if you want to know about the Knightly Orders, or Witch Hunter if you want to know more about the seedy underbelly. If you want to know all about the vampire counts, pick up the Von Karstein trilogy known as Vampire Wars. If you want a book from a greenskin perspective, pick up Carrick Eight Peaks because it has the novel Skarsnik, which is a very fun novel. It's amazing. And Skarsnik is the main character, and it's truly delightful.
I bet he's just the ultimate troll, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he's hysterical. If you want Wood Elves, pick up the Orion trilogy. And I believe
Beastmen? Beastmen is Gotrek and Felix, right?
Yeah, Beastmen just read books. You'll pick them up.
they'll be there somewhere getting killed by the heroes. Poor Beastmen.
Yeah, if you read enough Gotrek and Felix, you will get a lot of really powerful Beastmen.
Yeah.
Although, if you want an amazing book for Beastmen and Bretonnians, you want to pick up the Knights of Bretonnia Omnibus, which I believe is still on the Black Library website.
It's called Knights of Bretonnia?
Or just maybe Bretonnia.
Oh, that's the one that has that really classic like cover art with like the Bretonnian like soldier. Yeah, that art is so cool. Knights Errant, Knight of the Realm, Questing Knight, and Grail Knight. That sounds pretty badass.
It is. It follows a single character who goes from being just a total pleb all the way to being a Grail Knight. And it is a very fun series that has a massive amount of information on Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos, Bretonnia, the Empire, and Wood Elves.
That sounds awesome, man.
I think Chaos Dwarves, I don't really got anything for you. I'm sorry.
I just get no love.
The only time the Chaos Dwarves ever showed up significantly, pick up a Gotrek and Felix book called Road of Skulls. It has Chaos Dwarves as a main faction. And there are 2 Chaos Dwarf characters that it follows. And then the last book I will recommend heavily is the Sigmar Omnibus.
That's like the founding of the Empire, right?
Yeah, it follows the life of Sigmar. So you get to see Sigmar versus the Greenskins invasion, which is the first book. Then you get to see him versus a character I don't want to reveal in the second book, which is him fighting Chaos. And then the third book is about him versus Nagash.
Sounds pretty awesome. Yeah, man, there's so much to dig into. It's like, for anyone who hasn't like stumbled across Warhammer Fantasy lore, it's like, I didn't read any or know anything about Warhammer Fantasy until I started playing Total War Warhammer in 2016, and it just feels like I've discovered some treasure trove. It's like the same as like I just got into Star Trek 2, and I'm like, there's so many episodes and so many seasons, and it's like similar with this too, man. There's so much cool lore to be discovered.
Oh yeah. Oh, Vampire Counts or Vampire Coast.
There's literature for them? Yes,
pick up the Dreadfleet novel.
It's called Dreadfleet?
Yeah, Dreadfleet is a novel, and it's a ton of fun.
Who's the main character?
It's about the Dreadfleet crisis. So it is Count Noctilus versus what's his face, the human pirate. But you get to see in that book, you get to see Volkmar, Count Noctilus, RNS Assault Spite is a main character.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. You see, I always thought that like Vampire Coast didn't have any lore, or like, I mean, they have lore, but I didn't think it was represented in actual literature. But
they're all pretty much pulled from that like one
book
game. But thankfully, it got a book that's actually a lot of fun. It's a good book. Like, I actually really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then if you're a massive Dark Elf fan, pick up Malice Darkblade. He's got 2 omnibuses, I think, maybe 3. Okay. Malice has a stupid amount of literature.
Yeah, he has a ton of books, like almost in the vein of like Gotrek and Felix, right?
Yeah, he's very old-fashioned Dark Elf, so there's a lot of torture, a lot of body horror, and a lot of incest, but it is classic. A fun series.
Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, that's one that I had heard about. Even when I wasn't into Warhammer, like back in the day, I remember like seeing it at the stores, and there's just like a ton of books and stuff.
Yeah, and then if there's anything that I didn't mention, feel free to like ping me. Oh, Tomb Kings. Best Tomb Kings book is Gotrek and Felix, the Serpent Queen.
Okay, is that? I'm guessing that's with Kalita.
Yeah, that's Kalita, and it is a hoot.
So gotcha. It's called Serpent Queen. Serpent Queen, Gotrek. Oh, it's the Serpent Queen. Okay, I'm pulling it up now. By Josh Reynolds, I think. Yep, I found it.
Yep, and that's pretty much everything. And if there's anything, and then beyond that, once you've read those, feel free. Like if you ever want, the Black Library website is actually pretty easy to use. You can literally go on there, go to the search for products, and just type in like a subject. Like you can literally type in ogre, and it will show you every book that has Warhammer Fantasy ogres in it. Or you can type in a character like Nagash, and it'll show you all the Nagash books, or Karl Franz, stuff like that.
Yeah, they've keyworded it. I just searched ogre, for example, and there's one here that says the Great Maw. And it has like various battles and books they appear in, like Thankful and Bone Ripper. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so you can, if you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're looking to get these books, obviously you can go to the Black Library, obviously your bookstore if you have one. That, I mean, obviously with the Rona going on, probably not, but Black Library and the Games Workshop website would be like the two places to scour, and maybe like Amazon.
I will say, if you want physical copies, use the Black Library website or a third-party site. Do not use blacklibrary.com unless you want ebooks.
Got it.
Blacklibrary.com only sells ebooks now for Warhammer Classic.
Understood.
Now, blacklibrary.com sells paperbacks.
Yeah, okay. That's,
sorry. Gamesworkshop.com.
Yeah, because I was on here, I was like, I don't see them.
Tab sells paperbacks. Blacklibrary.com itself only sells ebooks.
So if you guys take a look at the screen I'm on now, this is blacklibrary.com. This is where you would get the ebooks. But if you want to go, just follow what I do on the website here. So you go to Games Workshop, you go to the Black Library tab right here up at the top, and then from there you go to Warhammer, it's Universe right here, and then you can go to Warhammer Chronicles, and that'll be Warhammer Fantasy that we know and love. So you're going to be able to see all the books here and search for them. And whatever you can't find here, obviously, there's a bunch of books which I understand aren't on either of these platforms anymore. You can just find them, I think, on Amazon would probably be your best bet. But
right. Mm-hmm.
Before we close out, I wanted to ask you one more question to seal the deal. What is your favorite Warhammer Fantasy book of all time, and why? What do you got for us? It's a brutal question, I know.
My favorite book so far would have to be, for Warhammer Fantasy. Mm-hmm. I think the book that took me on the wildest ride.
Here we go. Let's have it.
That I just like I was literally jumping in my seat the entire time I was reading it. Mm-hmm. Technically, it's two books, but I'm going to count them as one book because they have a story. Is Gotrek and Felix, Shaman Slayer, and Zombie Slayer.
And I'm guessing the titles are pretty self-explanatory, right? Like they fight some.
It's Gotrek and Felix versus Kimmler and Krell.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Over two books.
A 2-on-2 battle.
It is beyond insane. Yeah. Like it is gut-wrenching. It is heartbreaking. It is fucking epic. Yeah. You get to see what it's like when the vampire counts actually lay siege, and like the strategies Kimmler uses and how he uses like terror and all this other shit. You get to see Krell being used like a freaking Nazgul, where Kimmler makes him a undead wyvern of abomination mount, so Krell is flying around on a giant wyvern.
He should have that in Warhammer. Come on, give it to us.
It is wild. And you get to see Gotrek duel Krell on like 5 different occasions, and they're evenly matched, and it's crazy. You get to see Felix just trying to survive a ton of bullshit.
Yeah, classic.
It is an amazing book.
Yeah, how deep into the series is that? I'm on Vampire Slayer right now. I took a break from reading the series, but I paused on Vampire Slayer. But is that?
I believe that is the last. It is the 4th omnibus, so it's the last available omnibus.
Got it.
Because after you read after you read the 4th omnibus, you can basically go to the End Times books, which are Slayer or Ken Slayer and Slayer.
Yeah, I see Shaman Slayer and Zombie Slayer. It's 11 and 12 in the series.
Yep.
Out of 17. Yeah, so it's deep in there, but dude, the reads are easy too. Like if you guys are obviously regular readers, like you can get through these books so quick. It's like an easy fix. You're not going to feel like you're slogging, you know? It's like the way it's written is, I wouldn't say simplistic, but it's like easily digestible, you know? It's not like reading Tolkien's The Silmarillion where you're just like, God damn it, there's a million names on this page.
Yeah, they're popcorn books.
Yeah, it's great, man. It's good stuff. And yeah, I'm sure you've inspired many folks here to jump into Warhammer Fantasy. And obviously, if you guys want to take the deep dive and have it told to you by the glorious Sotek, you can head on over to his channel. You pretty much have videos on all of the subject matter we've touched on today, right? More or less.
A significant amount of it, yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever done like a deep dive into the literature on your channel?
I do sometimes during live streams. I don't have a dedicated video to it yet, but there will be one coming out pretty soon, leading into Christmas so that people can buy books.
Yeah. I think it's perfect timing, man. But yeah, I don't know. I think the one I want, of the ones you suggested, I don't know where I want to start. I mean, obviously I'll keep reading Gotrek and Felix, but the Champions of Chaos one seems really interesting because I've only ever had Chaos from the perspective of like the mustache twirling villains in Gotrek and Felix, you know? I'd like to see like them humanized and show their struggles and all that. I think that would be really fun. And Archaon has a pretty good book also, right?
Yes. Archaon's a little complicated.
Yeah. We'll
Archaon has 2 books that are technically tied together.
Okay.
They are very fun, but they are not
like the best.
The Archaon from Warhammer Fantasy.
Got it.
It's a cool character, but he is so wildly different from the Archaon in like Total War Warhammer or Age of Sigmar or the End Times that it's kind of ridiculous.
Weird. Yeah. Okay.
Like there's a lot of parallels in his story, and I do think it's worth reading because you get a lot of the big story beats.
Yeah.
But they kind of go a little over the top with Bellacor's involvement in the story, where there's literal like time loops.
Oh god.
And like Archaon dies like 30 times, but every time he dies, he literally like gets restored to a save point. I'm not kidding. That's literally what happens.
Yeah, he save scums all these battles. Yeah.
Yeah, he basically keeps save scumming unwillingly,
Yeah,
but Be'lakor keeps save scumming, which they don't never explain how Be'lakor can do that. And there's also some issues like Archaon doesn't have one of his eyes, like he literally has like a heap of warpstone shoved into his head, but every version of Archaon that's ever existed has both eyes. So yeah. I'm not sure why the author did that.
Yeah. So you wouldn't recommend it as one of the earlier books, but
if you're like, man, I really want to know the lore behind Warhammer Fantasy, I would not recommend Archaon's book series.
This is good, man.
If you're like, man, I love Archaon and I would love to know everything about him, yeah, sure, pick it up. It's worth the fun.
You're calling it like you see it, man. I dig it. And yeah, I'm gonna dive in too. I'm like looking at all these books right now. I see the Tyrion and Teclis Omnibus and Rise of the Nagash. Like those are pretty good as well, right?
I'm actually reading Tyrion and Teclis right now. Because I originally only owned the second one for some reason, but I finally picked up the omnibus, and I am having a ball with that.
Yeah,
I think my favorite, like if someone was just like, I already have Gotrek and Felix, I want to just pick up one right now and read it, which one was the most fun? I would probably say the War of Vengeance. Yeah,
I mean that's a pretty epic like universe building situation, like between these two powerhouse nations, and then
if anybody wants to know why there are not as many dragons in the world or why the dwarves don't like using flying machines, this book will tell you.
Yeah, that would explain why we don't get more cool flying machines.
There is basically like a nuclear explosion in one of the books. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. I got to get into that. Yeah, War of Vengeance. I've definitely I've read like Wikipedias and things like that on the story, but I'm sure it isn't done justice. But yeah, you guys can see, of course, here I have War of Vengeance if you guys want to check that out as well. That's the great cockfight between the dwarves and the elves, which explains their good old rivalry there. But
but there's also some very sneaky bitch other factions in there as well. But I won't spoil who's in there.
Some treason, some treachery.
There's a lot of treason and treachery going on.
But yeah, I mean, again, man, I want to thank you for joining. It was a super fun time chatting with you. I mean, obviously we've chatted off recording about this stuff, but it's always fun to rehash these great books and this great lore, man, that I feel like I'm just getting into. But
yeah, and if anybody
it's awesome.
Who's listening to this picks up a book, tweet me on Twitter and let me know how it goes, because I'm always super happy to hear how people's first dives into Warhammer Fantasy goes.
Yeah, and if you're looking for Sotek's Twitter account, you can see right under his camera there on the bottom, you can see his channel name as well as his Twitter. What do they call that? Twitter handle? Is that what? Handle? Yeah. Yes. I'm such a curmudgeon of technology. The old handle there. Yeah, you can see. I know. I know. I feel like it, man. I was like struggling to plug in like cables on my computer today, getting like all frustrated, like goddamn technology. But yeah, you can see Sotek's handle there. So yeah, if you pick up one of these books, head on over to Twitter, let him know. Obviously, you've probably been to his channel or seen us doing videos together and whatnot. But make sure to check out his channel if you guys want that deep dive on Warhammer lore, all those just hours and hours of content going over the specifics of all these factions. It's amazing content. So on that note, man, just want to thank you again for joining. Do you have anything you'd like to say before we close out? Any words of inspiration? Any last minute thoughts you perhaps want to get in? What do you got for us, brother?
I would say that now is a perfect time to... a lot of these books you can find at your local bookstores if you just go in and ask. I know Barnes & Noble sells a lot of the Chronicle books.
Yeah.
Or your local Games Workshop will definitely have them. Or you can pick up the ebook or order from online. And now it's a perfect time because the world is on fire, so you should probably stay inside and read.
Yeah, I know, dude. The skies here in California are like literally orange and raining ash. It's
Texas today. If in the Panhandle it is 41 degrees, on the coast directly across it's 109.
Jesus,
so
dude.
We're kind of having a weird moment.
Are you and your dog Chloe just like melting in the shadows there?
We're okay. Like we're like right smack in the middle, so it's like 72 degrees.
Oh, that's nice, dude.
Oh yeah, for me it's lovely.
Dude, I would kill for that right now. That's so nice.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I can't imagine. I've seen the pictures of California, and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the end times, dude. Just like you're just waiting for the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse to descend.
I haven't seen the movie, so I was genuinely confused by it. But I saw 2 stills. One was a picture, I think, of L.A. or San Francisco, and the other one was a picture of that. Oh God, what was the remake movie they did? 20 something.
You mean, are you talking about the Kurt Russell Escape from L.A.? Like those ones, or
no. The movie about people that are like synthetic and
Blade Runner.
Yeah, the new Blade Runner.
Yeah. Dude, the sky does look like that. That like creepy post dystopian glow, over in history.
Side pick, and they were like, "Which one is L.A.?" And I was like, "Oh God,
I can't tell.
I don't know."
I know. We just need aliens to show up. That would be like the ultimate capstone for 2020.
Please, I would be such a good pet. Just make
just take me.
Just let me play Total War and let the world not suck. Just
you'll teach them lore about our culture, dude. Yeah, it's wild, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, dude.
We'll get through it. Yeah. Thanks again for joining. I know it's getting late, but you can see it's dark here in my room. But Sotek, thanks again for joining. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Make sure to check out Sotek over on Twitter and the YouTube, which of course is his primary platform. And until next time, if you guys have any ideas, anything you'd like to see, also any lore questions that you might be interested in asking Sotek, hit him up in the comments. I'm sure he'll be here. And
I will. Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.